Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and I'm joined by my other host,
Stu. And it feels like I haven't been on the last couple of episodes, so it's good to be back.
And when you know, Stu shows up for our 50th episode. That means our fans, and we certainly hope we have fans, have tolerated us talking about Cube 50 times. Oh my goodness.
That's once.
It kind of just goes, it just bounces right by.
And it's one a week, right? So this is 2 weeks off a year that we've been doing this. Which
yeah,
is
we've been pretty steady. What did we open up? May of last year, give or take. We just celebrated our, previously a couple months back, we celebrated our 10K episode. Now we're rolling up on 50. Good times here at UberCube. A lot to celebrate.
It is.
Which also some more celebrations we have. We are fortunate and blessed to have multiple of our cubes to be featured at CubeCon 2023, right? Yeah. CubeCon, we're so excited. UberBear's Horror Cube and Chris Moore, aka Sandwich's Peasant Cube, in addition to UberBear's Artifact Cube. And then we've got May with the Fae Cube.
Very exciting.
I mean, those, and you know, the fake cube was not included, right? That was just going to happen. I mean, they had to get in front of us, so we talked about Milton Bradley was going to get it, so CubeCon's got to get it first. But yeah, so we are just super hype and excited. All of Team UberCube will be at CubeCon 2023.
October 19th to October 22nd in Madison, Wisconsin. And it's in the Game Hole Con, which is the convention, which is also a lot of fun. And yeah, CubeCon's going to be there. We're going to be there for, last year was the inaugural CubeCon, which was incredible. And this year number 2. And as always, we've mentioned before, we really hope to see as many of our listeners and Cube aficionados, enthusiasts out there. It's a whole lot of fun, whole bunch of official events and also kind of after hours, Cube drafting and Magic playing and discussion and all that. It's going to be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, it's just a total blast, actually. It's the camaraderie. And it's my understanding, I think, according to J-Bro and Terrell, that the size is virtually doubled this year.
It has, pretty much.
And we looked at the cube submissions. I believe they had 80 cubes after they filtered out, and it was 80 that went up for bat. It's insane how many people, and it's amazing how many, just the cube variety alone with these recent polls was absolutely insane. Good job, CubeCon staff, because the groupings were just, my group alone was absolutely
stacked.
And it was stacked. It was so frighteningly stacked. Because those cubes were they were just bonkers how well curated they were.
And I will say, like,
every one of them felt that way.
Yeah, and I took the time. I obviously voted from all the Twitter submissions and all the Twitter polls and all that kind of stuff. I really did take the time. I checked out all the cubes that were up for submission. I'm going through all the lists. I'm looking at the overviews. I'm reading all the archetypes and all the descriptions and all the history. And it really does show how passionate so many of the curators are that submitted those cubes for CubeCon, right? Because it's not just, hey, look, here's 360 or 540 cards that I threw together. It's here's a history of this cube and all the choices and how I wanted the experience to play out for anyone who gets to draft this cube. And it really does show the passion that so many people have for curating these cubes and these experiences. And I will say last year was a blast. I think this year is going to be just so much better. So many more cubes, so much more choices, so many more people that are going to be there. And yeah, I hope that our listeners and so many more cube people and cube lovers are going to see us out there.
Yeah, so we're really excited. Hit us up on our Discord, actually, and then I'll go ahead and pitch over. You need to also go to CubeCon's Discord. Feel free to reach out to either us or CubeCon, and you can get all the details on how this stuff's playing out. Tickets do go on sale. I don't have the exact date. Pardon me, CubeCon. I apologize, but I do know it fires off in July.
It's coming in a couple of weeks. So we're recording. This episode's going to be released June 12th, around about there.
About a month.
Yeah. So it's going to be right around a month, early July, that the tickets are going to be on sale. So yeah, again, hope to see you there.
And super excited. And also really cool that we wanted to help out out CubeCon. UberCube decided to be a CubeCon sponsor, which is something pretty cool too.
That's right.
We're fortunate enough to be able to help out with this event that we want to help every year. Super excited, except I'm going to make Stu do it next year. But but other than that, let's get over to the topic. That's enough preliminary.
So let's start out with, this is an episode, the topic here, we hung out for a little bit, as Anthony and I tend to do, and kind of, just waxed lyrical about Cube and about Magic and about cards and all that kind of stuff. And we came upstairs to start recording, and Anthony said, look, I got an episode, and I think this would be cool for the kind of night that we're doing this, right? So we've kind of been hanging out, and we've had a bit of scotch, and we've been, talking about the magics, as we like to do. And so the topic of this episode is called Paper, Rock, Axe. So let's do, first of all, what we always do here at UberCube. And so I'm going to give a quick history on this one. So the drink that we're having tonight is by New Belgium. It's the Voodoo Vice IPA. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because this is both for Anthony and I. And the can has basically a skeletal Michael Jackson on it. There's no other way to describe it. It's got the white suit, the white hat, the cool sunglasses, the thumb in the belt. It looks amazing.
Sure, it's not Sonny Crockett, Miami Vice.
It's definitely not.
It 100% says Vice.
I know, but it's Michael Jackson.
Are you certain?
I've convinced myself.
I can hear the Air of the Night playing right now.
I've convinced myself of this. I'm not hearing anything otherwise.
And we are also enjoying Jura single malt Scotch whiskey. 10 years. It is from the Isle of Jura, which we do love our Scotch here.
All right, let's crack this.
Let's go.
All right, so paper, rock, axe, right? So obviously axe, equipment. I'm going to ask this question because, again, Anthony kind of sprung me on this one as one that we could kind of vibe with a little bit while we're recording. So first of all, I'll ask you the question. Is this where we're going to talk about just equipment or the play decisions about equipment?
The play decisions. And this is going to be like a root question type of episode. It's not about the power involved in the cards, in this case, Bloodforged Battle Axe, that's going to be featured. It's going to be kind of our case study. We're going to do 2 case study cards as we progress. And we're going to talk about how those fill into your decision making with the inclusion of not only power level, but cost, and whether or not it's even worth your time, and when are equipment no longer relevant.
Okay,
it all kind of weighs in the scales of the decision making.
Okay.
And that goes into your power level, your environment dependent, right?
Absolutely.
But this one is a good case study.
So listeners, if you will, follow along with this episode. And, if you're listening to this in your car or, wherever you're listening to this, understand that there's going to be some questions of you, right? So not that you have to get out a pen and paper and write it down, but if you choose to do so, go ahead. But we want this to be a little bit of a sort of a quasi-interactive episode, right? Where we're asking the question and there's going to be some problems or, possibilities laid out in front of you. And we'd like you to think, what would I do in this situation? Is there a right line? Is there a wrong line? Is there I might do this in this situation, and if there's another situation, which I suppose is kind of a cheap way of getting out of it. But there is going to be decision-making forks that are important when you're thinking about play lines and when you're either designing the cube or you're thinking about how an archetype might play out. These are important questions to ask yourself when you're making these decisions on how to manage the equipment that's in your cube.
So it's going to be a choose-your-own-adventure type of episode as we go through this.
I like that.
And the possibilities are infinite. We know that. And if you're thinking that what-if scenarios over and again, you're never going to get out. So we're going to kind of lay out some scenarios. So let's talk about the featured card. And it's going to be Bloodforged Battle Axe. And for one colorless, you get an artifact equipment. Doesn't say axe, strangely enough. That would be kind of neat and really cool. But equipped creature gets +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a token that is a copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe. Equip 2.
It does say axe. It says Bloodforged Battle Axe.
And it's implied.
And then it says create a token that's a copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe.
It just feels like this thing is alive. And this was interesting. So we're going to kind of do some math discussion and how this interaction works. But the gist is whenever you connect with said creature, and we're going to talk about some scenarios, we're going to make Savannah Lion. Everybody familiar with Savannah Lion? It's 1 plains. Make a 2/1, I believe it's category lions, but it's Savannah Lions, right? And I'll include this in the show notes for those that aren't familiar with Savannah Lion, and I'm not sure how that's even possible, but it's from Alpha. But it's really interesting. All we're going to do is attach Bloodforged Battle Axe to a 2/1, and we're going to attack.
Okay.
And so what happens here, Stu, whenever it connects? So we're going to go turn 1, Savannah Lions.
All right, so turn 1, Savannah Lions.
Play a second mana. Cast Bloodforged Battle Axe.
Cast Bloodforged Battle Axe. So turn 2, I've only got access to 2 mana. So I've had to cast my Bloodforged Battle Axe, which is 1, assuming there's no Soul Ring or marks or anything like that, right? No ramp.
Any ramp.
So I'm turn 1, 1 mana, turn 2, 2 mana, right? So turn 1, I've got my lions out. Turn 2, I got my axe out. I have 1 mana remaining, but I can't equip the axe on turn 2.
So here's your first point of decision. Do you choose to cast Bloodforged Battle Axe with the potential of connecting it to the 2/1 line and making it into a 4/1 line on the third turn, or do you choose to progress your game state by casting a second spell, say a 2-cost mana curve on creature, whatever? I don't care. We're going to go with 2 white.
It's a good question.
Or white.
It's a great question, and I will say this: it will obviously, as any question about what would you do in this situation, generally typically will be, what do I have in my hand? If I have a Bloodforged Battle Axe and another 1 mana creature, I'm probably in some ways incentivized to get both of them out.
We're going to make this somewhat like the Haunted Mansion Disney. You're in the cart and you're moving along. Granted, the scenarios are there and you as the viewer are looking around the room, seeing the ghost, and you can look anywhere you want. But Disney keeps drawing your attention to where you should be putting your eyes.
What is this 2 mana creature that I have? Does it have lifelink? Does it have first strike?
It's irrelevant to the conversation.
Is there another one?
So
let's just say,
as of now,
I'm going to look at this and say, you know what? This can kind of get out of hand.
Potentially.
So I might be incentivized to get me a Bloodforged Battle Axe down on the battlefield. And you know what? Yes, it does mean that I will only be able to attack for 2 on turn 2.
Correct.
Because obviously I can still swing with my Savannah Lions.
Correct.
But it does mean that on turn 3,
you're representing a 4/1
I do have the potential to go crazy. And who knows, if I've drafted an equipment deck, maybe I've got other equipment that I can, put out there for even cheaper. Maybe I've got a Shuko.
So now in turn 3, your Savannah Lions, you've now made the decision. We're gonna choose that page in the Choose Your Own Adventure.
All right, Savannah Lions,
and you have now attacked. And you've now connected. Just pretend that OP hasn't put up a defense mechanism of any form yet.
Or they've got a creature out there that they just cannot lose, need that creature, can't block with it because it's just way too important for my strategy.
That is a fair assessment.
So yes. I'm gonna take one for the team. I'm gonna let Bloodforged Battle Axe and this equipment and this creature hit me, and they're gonna get a copy.
So they've lost 2 previously. Now I'm gonna attack, and I'm gonna hit
dangerous.
them. And now I'm gonna hit them, and now they're gonna lose 4 more, so they've lost 6.
Yep.
By this, turn 3.
Turn 3.
And now they make another Bloodforged Battle Axe.
That's right.
Because they've connected in our scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So now they have 2 Bloodforged Battle Axes. But this one has now made a copy for free.
Right.
Reducing that cost by 1. So now it only costs 2 to equip. So now you have some more decisions to make. And this is the root question here. As we drill down into this idea, at what point do you continue to make these axes and continue to stack high on said Savannah Lion, or branch your curve forward? And that's a very specific to, we know what's in your hand and what your choices are. Choose your own adventure, right? But the math really starts playing into this idea on decision making as to whether or not there's value add for continuing to make this free weapon. Would you agree, Stu?
I would agree. And here's where things can kind of get a little bit out of hand, right? So up until now, we've talked about the math with stacking it onto this 1 Savannah Lions, right, as an example, and just swinging it in, and then with the potential of, do we buff this Savannah Lions even more? But that's not our only option, is it? Because it's not like we're forced to attach our new copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe to the Savannah Lions.
Yes.
Right? So maybe on our turn 2, when we cast the Bloodforged Battle Axe, maybe we did put out a 1 mana creature, and now maybe we have a second target to put our new copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe. And now not only do we have 1 4/1, but we have 2 4/1s. And now things start to get real interesting, because now this is a huge amount of pressure that you're representing. I've already attacked for 2 on our second turn, and now on turn 3 I've attacked and I've got another copy. Look at the amount of damage that I'm potentially representing in subsequent turns, even if it's just another copy of Savannah Lions. Heck, even if it's a 1-power creature and I've got a 4-power Savannah Lions and a 3-power creature. Now that's 7 power that I'm representing, potentially 8. Correct. Now that starts the math is starting to get. I'm liking this math. As someone who has this Bloodforged Battle Axe and this Savannah Lions, and who knows, maybe another creature, I'm liking this math that I'm getting to swing for this kind of amount so early on. And not just that, but you know what? This second copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe, I didn't have to cast it. I didn't have to take a card out of my hand. It's just sitting there. And all I have to do is pay 2 mana, and it's on a creature.
Now that we went down the multiple, it's kind of, for those who have seen the Labyrinth, and it says, which way you're going to choose up or down, and she chose down. So when you're doing this, you're also diverting resources that would, and granted, it's equip 2 colorless, right? So it's any of your mana across the board. That could be your soul ring, whatever. You're choosing to now migrate resources that would have progressed your board state. So as we think through this episode, critical mass of something like a Bloodforged Battle Axe, that as you continue to generate this volume of them, and you're getting swaths of them, hypothetically. And every time you connect, you make a new one. At what point do they become irrelevant? At what point are you just stacking them? Because the reason why I mention this is because
I don't think they're ever not relevant.
Well, I run, to be truthful with this, I run Bloodforged Battle Axe in my Uberbear's Horror Cube, and I run it in my La Femme Fatale Cube, and I run it in my Artifact Cube. Which one do you think performs the best with Bloodforged Battle Axe?
I'm going to probably say the Horror Cube.
Thematically, yes.
Maybe the Femme Fatale Cube, though? Well, okay, let me go all the way back, right? We're approaching this from a very aggro-centric perspective. So are you asking, what does it perform best in as an aggro card, or what does it perform best in as a way to replicate artifacts? Or are you just saying...
No, you actually hit the nail on the head, because this card now has split again. Now you're talking about, this is an aggro card. I'm going to push my Savannah Lions across the line. I don't care if you turn this into a vampire or something. Sure. Doesn't matter. What you're doing here is you have a choice with this card. It replicates itself, so now it also becomes cannon fodder for an artifact-centric theme. Right. Like Goblin Welders, for example, or KCI combo, or something where you just don't care, because there's a point where you're going to stack... Because I've seen this with all my cubes, where there's a point where the opponent or the player that's driving the Bloodforged Battle Axe just starts actually having them sitting over there, their cute little sideboard, because it's diversion of resources. There's a critical threshold here where you don't want to keep stacking high on your creatures, because you need to move your threats forward on curve, else your opponent will outweigh you with a greater threat, right? So that too comes at a cost, even though you're getting a free spell. This card can be a bit of a trap for a player looking at it as, I can keep stacking high on Savannah Lions to keep making this multiplying critter that keeps increasing by +2s, possibly, and or the go wide strategy.
I think that you need to have some respect for the fact that this can, for free, for no investment of cards out of your hand, take a creature that by itself wouldn't be a significant threat and turn it into one, again, with no investment of cards from your hand, and literally only for the 2 mana equip cost that Bloodforged Battle Axe represents, right? Because I've connected with it, I get a copy of it, all it costs is 2 mana. I can just keep stacking it onto one creature. All right, so I've gone from a 4 power to a 6 power.
Path number 3 in this scenario. It's a mana sink by the nature of what it is.
And listen, I will tell you this: I am a huge fan of mana sinks, especially in colors where maybe drawing cards is a little bit more awkward, right? So white kind of sticks out. Maybe red sticks out a little bit, has the looting ability, but not the raw card draw that maybe like a blue and a black does. But so for something like that, I look at it and think, man, to be able to get this kind of advantage with without having to expend resources from my hand, it's very, very, very powerful. And having, you know, I don't want to like focus specifically on this card too much. And again, we're kind of going in this, or at least I am a little bit dry, where we're kind of doing this off the cuff. This was the first one that you presented to me in this equipment sort of centric episode. I am going to look at this and I'm going to realize, if I draft this card, right? So let's go all the way back, right? Yes, we've got our Savannah Lions, but I'm just looking at, I look at this and maybe even it's the first pack, or maybe the pack's been around a couple of times and I find this. I am always going to look at a card like this and think that it represents so much. It represents a mana sink. It represents a way to replicate itself, and a mana sink that doesn't require cards out of my hand, right? So I'm going to get a little bit excited about it, even though I'm not because I know it's all it's really doing is giving one creature +2/+0, but it's kind of a cool little tree for decision making.
It actually, it splits in a lot of branches, and the math can get out of control. So kind of another scenario that we ran through was back to the stacking on the said Savannah Lions on going along that tier.
So now we're stacking our Savannah Lions.
At what point do you stop putting this on Savannah Lions? And we use in our example.
So Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. So Anthony's just scrolled down and showed me this card, and he knows how much I love Thalia because she's just incredible, right? She's one of the absolute premier white aggro cards or white Death and Taxes cards. Now things start to get very interesting because now it's first strike. So I'm gonna
interrupt. This is intentional.
Go ahead, please.
Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. The axe gets around it.
Wonderful hate bear.
The axe circumvents that because it's free every time you connect.
Didn't have to cast this card.
You didn't have to cast it.
Got it for nothing.
It's pretty interesting, actually.
Sure
right?
is.
Not quite so Savannah Lion-y.
And the first strike is. Obviously, Thalia and the non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast is such a powerful effect in a hate bears and a Death and Taxes effect, right? Or a Death and Taxes deck. The first strike, if you're now sort of transitioning into or as well as I can also tax you, but now I can also start swinging this 4 power. And hang on a second, did I swing for 4 and connect? Now I've got another one, so now I can attach and I've got a 6 power. But hang on, don't hold back there. If I swing, I've now got 2, and if I connect, I'm doubling that, and I'm creating 2 copies. So now I've got 4 Bloodforged Battle Axes. But what do I want to do with these?
Do with all these battle axes?
What do I want to do with them? Do I really want to spend 4 mana putting 4 more power?
You see where this card is very interesting. It has a lot of divergent themes within it.
Sure does.
So it gives you an opportunity for an aggro swing. It gives you an opportunity for a artifact, some kind of sack or whatever, something to add into improvise effects or something along those lines, right?
Affinity.
Affinities, etc. And it also gives you the ability for just a pure mana sink where you have nothing to do, and heck, I can't get anything else, so I'm going to equip this to my creature because I am bored and stuck installed.
So now let's talk about this one, because
it's now an analog,
so Anthony has scrolled down in our show notes, which obviously we make available on the Discord. Please feel free to go check them out. So the next one is Bone Splitter. So this one is just 1 mana to cast, and it's only 1 mana to equip, half the mana, if you will. But it also gives the same effect of the +2/+0, no copy effect, but much cheaper to get out. 50% of your resources to be able to attach this to a creature. That is a huge difference compared to a Bloodforged Battle Axe, right?
I would say the Bloodforged Battle Axe represents a futures market for me, where you're banking on that connection to continue to make that investment. Whereas this card is...
Bloodforged Battle Axe is like
this is a paupered peasant standard. I run this in a lot of cubes. I believe actually I run this in my Powered Vintage cube. This card is reliable. I mean, it's very little amount of investment. Can be splashed in any deck.
Sure.
And so this card is just super versatile. I love it. But I'm partial to the Bloodforged Battle Axe because even though it costs 1 more to do the thing, it has a lot more complexity. It's more divergent. I think it's a very interesting piece of equipment that's oftentimes overlooked, and because it oftentimes falls into the same lane as Bone Splitter that costs 1. Use the efficiency spectrum, but maybe it's being overlooked in terms of its complexity level and the lanes, the amount of the choose your own adventures.
I would agree. And I would say this, if I am, and I think this is where you can sort of see the interesting lines, especially for someone who may be more familiar with the cube environment, right? So I will look at a Bloodforged Battle Axe in your artifact cube, or in a cube maybe that I'm familiar with, where I know that a density of artifacts on the battlefield is going to be impactful outside of just having an aggro threat. Now, that's not to say that the aggro threat is not something that really should be considered, right? Because getting to pump to a creature for 2 power that sustains through turns every turn for only 2 mana when it connects, that's not to be trifled with, right? Especially in, let's just say, a thematic cube, right? Maybe not so much in a vintage environment, but certainly in a thematic cube, the ability to be able to just power your creatures up consistently, plus the fact that they don't leave the battlefield. It's not like, hey, your creature's dead, those artifacts are gone. Let's say I swing in with a 6 power or an 8 power even, right? You're now incentivized to block a creature that's that big. That's a huge take off your life, right? And you know, if you're chump, I don't even want to say chump blocking. Maybe you are chump blocking, but likely you are, right? Now I can just move all those onto another creature. So the threat is very, very significant. Now you move away from the aggro threat. Now you start thinking about the threat of my opponent now has a lot of artifacts on the battlefield. What can they do with all those artifacts within the scope of the cube, right? So as I've scrolled down, and Anthony has showed me, and this is a card that he knows I like very much, is Krark Clan Ironworks. This is a 4-mana artifact, and it's literally sacrifice an artifact to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. So now you think, hang on a second, all I had to do was spend 1 mana on a creature and 2 mana on a Bloodforged Battleaxe, and okay, I had to equip it. Oh man. But this can start getting out of hand real fast. I only maybe need to connect with this thing a couple of times, and suddenly I've got access to a bunch of mana. Or I've got the ability to sack artifacts for additional effects. I can either not sack them for things like affinity or, you know, improvise, that kind of stuff. Or I've got the sack ability for things like modular.
Or you can sack your axes to equip your axes, because that's actually a line of play. You see where I'm going with this, right? It actually
I didn't think about that. That's incredible.
It pays for itself. Yes. That's what I wanted. I was hoping he would catch on to that, folks. I'm like, oh my God.
I'm too busy talking to think about that. But now, yes, I love
you
that.
see it now, don't you? See it. Because sacrifice an artifact had 2 mana in your mana pool. Well, the Bloodforged Battleaxe had an equipment cost of 2. So after you've had this excessive pile of them, you can use Krark Clan to sack the ones you don't need to pay the casting
What's
cost.
The ones I don't
equipment
need?
Cost. You see where I'm going with this,
What's the there's no Bloodforged Battleaxe I don't need. I want all of them.
You want all of them. You want all of them.
Yeah,
and there's other things you can do with this. We're being pretty linear. This is Anthony choosing his old adventure here. I actually want to reference our previous episode with our good friend Sam Mitch, where we talked about both his Peasant Cube and Uberbear's Artifact Cube.
Sure.
And we actually featured a card Scrapyard Recombiner. For 3 colorless, you get an artifact creature construct, modular 2. This creature enters the battlefield with 2 1/1 counters on it. When it dies, you may put a 1/1 counter on target artifact creature. But it has an ability to tap, sacrifice an artifact, Bloodforged Battleaxe that we have in excess. Search your library for a construct card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, and it's, you know, it's a modular 2, so it's a 2/2. My point is that the excess axes that you get from the connection of a card in this environment, what can you do with them? Well, they're kind of like a savings account where you can spend them for other synergies, as Stu mentioned, affinity or sack abilities.
Improvise,
Yeah, improvise, all these different abilities, right? So it's really neat to see whenever you don't always have to equip them. It's just a different lane. And that's what I like about it. And I think that's what makes it different than Bone Splinter, even though Bone Splinter's really cool. Bone Splinter. Actually,
Splitter?
Bone
Splitter?
You know, words. But it's really, it just makes it complete. I like the divergent ideas behind the.
I agree. And I would say that Bone Splitter, generally, I look at that as a more hyper aggro centric card, right? Because it's only 1 mana to equip it. It's, you know, hey, I'll swing with, hey, even a token. Being able to make a token into a 3 power very early on, that's not to be sniffed at. And especially, like, what are you going to do? You're going to block? Are you going to chump block? Okay, fine. I'll move it over post-combat to another token or to another creature. It's not as exciting. Bloodforged Battleaxe is definitely a much more of an exciting card, but you can see kind of where the parallels that you draw. For me, though, I want something that's going to be a little less linear and something that's going to allow me to expand upon the strategies, right? It's not going to be so aggro. Like, my mind is already thinking, where can I go from this with the fact that it replicates? I didn't even think about it as a replicate because I want to do all these other cool things with artifacts, right? In let's say, I know this is kind of our boogeyman on the channel, in EDH decks that I run it, I'm kind of looking at it as I want this to go out of control because I play in an aggro deck. I want it to just replicate itself so I can stick it on as many creatures as possible and just represent a bigger threat. But now in a cube environment where you do have, you know, obviously way more lanes than you would do in like, you know, EDH deck as an example. You've got so many possibilities with a card like that where you can expand and the possibilities are endless.
You can see where the card gets evaluated, and the reason why I often
Very
think it gets overshadowed because people look at it because the efficiency rating of it. Yes. And then they tie in they think it's simply aggro, and aggro can't afford that. Maybe you look at this as not aggro. You look at it as what can I do with welder or tinkerer effects, etc. Right?
That was I will say that Goblin Welder was kind of the first thing that I thought of, right? So maybe it's just because I gotta stop saying EDH. But because one of the decks that I play this in is a Boros deck, or in fact, the deck that I play this in is a Boros deck. So it would really be awful for me if I had to like Faithless Looting and put a Cauldron Complete or a Batter Skull or something like that in the graveyard. And then, you know, I can Goblin Welder one of my Bloodforged Battle Axe tokens and get back, you know, a Batter Skull or a Worm Coil Engine on turn 3 or turn 4. Like, that's a really terrible line of play, and I'm probably not going to win like only 80% of my games where I get to do that.
It's just looking at, the point is it's just evaluating a card from a different lens.
Yes.
May and I talked about this recently. We did evaluating subtypes through a different lens, where we're just looking and studying, was it Harmonic Prodigy? Well, the same thing happens here with a card like this. I'm not suggesting that everybody should put Bloodforged Battle Axe in their environments. I'm saying that I've had a great time with it. I know it's not going to be in the highest of high tier cubes. Or maybe it is, but I just wanted people to understand or to see that there's different lanes that maybe got overlooked, because sometimes when you look at equipment like that, like Bone Splinter or that card, or
Bone Splitter, I think is
Bone Splitter. I'm gonna have to say it right eventually.
That's fine. I honestly,
it's aggro-centric.
It is aggro-centric.
Whereas this is aggro-centric plus.
I couldn't agree more. And not only do I think it's aggro plus, I think that it's almost good enough where if your cube is, dare I say, a little bit artifact removal light, maybe it's even a little creature removal light, maybe where aggro, where you expect more of the creatures to bump heads with each other, this card needs to be on the watch list a little bit, right? I will say, I don't think this is a good enough card for a vintage cube. I really don't. I just think there's too many more powerful cards that overshadow it.
Yeah, sure.
But I do think that in a cube, in a thematic cube where aggro is a big deal, right? Where creatures are going to go up against each other. This is something that really needs to be a little, you need to be a little careful with, right? Because again, the fact that it has that replication, anytime you could think about putting this on a flyer, right? You have the ability to put this on a flyer, and your opponent doesn't have flyers. It can start getting out of hand very quickly, even in just a straight up aggro environment where all you have to do the next turn is pay 2 mana, or even that turn, pay 2 mana and put it on. And now you've gone from a 4 power flyer to a 6, or a 2 to a 4 power to a 6 power flyer over a couple of turns. That ends games very, very quickly. So I think it's can get out of hand, like I say, very quickly.
So I name these episodes very intentionally. So this one, as we talked about, it's paper, rock, axe. So we're going to kind of, obviously, we just did the axe. We jumped a little ahead. That was your scissors. That was your proverbial scissors.
So what are we doing next?
This is all on paper. That's the lulls here. But now we're going to talk about rock. Stu, what makes rock?
For me, what makes rock is a good guitar, a nice, a good drum beat, right? And a good bass line.
Who makes rock that's on the paper?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about something else. So the person, or the goblin artificer who makes rocks, is Toggo, Goblin Weaponsmith. 2 colorless, 1 red for a legendary creature, Goblin Artificer. And he has, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a colorless equipment artifact token named Rock. With equipped creature has pay 1 generic and tap, sacrifice Rock. This creature deals 2 damage to any target and equip 1. And it has partner.
So there is a theme. Partner doesn't matter until it matters.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what rock is. So rock is a token equipment. Equipped creature has pay 1, tap, sacrifice Rock. This creature deals 2 damage to any target, equip 1, which Stu covered. Okay, so the theme of this episode, as you noticed, and we talked about Bloodforged Battle Axe, is once it connected, and that was the caveat, is that you had to have a creature on it, and it had to connect, which is not necessarily amazing, but once it did, it began to replicate itself for free upon each connection. Okay, so that was the free or pseudo-free. It required combat. Right?
Sure,
Not entirely free, but
of course,
moving the game forward, it did. Well, Toggo, interestingly enough, plays into a Lands Matters theme, right? So whenever you're doing your Kraken, your fetches, etc., you make rock. So we kind of went over these scenarios early on where we talked about, like, how many times do you continue to, at what point is an equipment that you've made multiple copies of still useful to your game-winning strategy? That was the core of this. when is too much, right? How far do you go down that rabbit hole of making equipment where you just stop equipping them because you need to keep going to those upper echelon of that mana curve? Let's just say, so we're progressing along. Let's say we're doing a mono red deck and we're progressing along. We want to keep our curve going up. At what point do we go from Toggo and we want to get to, say, a Glorybringer, hypothetically?
Okay.
Right? So when are we going to keep diverting our resources, using our mana to tap, to keep putting rock on, or Bloodforged Battle Axe was kind of what I was trying to do with this episode. But these equipments, and this one's even more free because it just pays you off for playing the game. There's no investment aside from casting Toggo to get rock, which plays into those ideas we talked about before, where in an artifact-centric environment, you now have a secondary resource that you can sacrifice, etc. It gives you a divergent method. When you look at this, you think equipment. So equipment can oftentimes lead the person that's driving the equipment, the pilot, to think that it's exclusively for an aggro, for an attack strategy. And I know there's exceptions to that. But what I mean is this does 2 damage to player. And through one lens, that's what you see. It's a shock variant that costs you. It's spread over. You paid 1 colorless. After you've attached, equip, throw, hit them for 2, right? And you repeat it every time you crack a fetch or we'll go with an Evolving Wilds. Doesn't matter. Once you've cracked it, you get another variant of it. But at what point do you have too many rocks? So how do you divert those resources? That's where I was kind of evaluating these 2 cards on the same spectrum, is that they don't have any cost except for playing the game of Magic.
And I will say that line right there, there's no cost outside of playing Magic. And there's a lot of cards and there's a lot of strategies that reward you for just playing Magic, right? And typically, a lot of the lands matter stuff kind of falls into that category, right? So anything that rewards you for a land entering the battlefield, in this case, you are getting rock. And I would like to say, I think the 2 damage is so on point, right? 3 damage would obviously be way too much, right? You can't lightning bolt for just 1 mana every time a land entering. One damage would just be a little bit underpowered. 2 damage is right on point. That is not to be scoffed at when it only costs 1 to equip, and the creature doesn't need to do anything. It just needs to sit there and just you tap it and pay 1, and I deal 2 damage to your face, and then I will play a land. It's a fetch land. I get a rock. I will sack that and get another land. Now I've got 2 more rocks. Now I'm representing 6 damage, and all I've done is crack a fetch land and put another land into play and paid a couple of mana. Again, it really doesn't cost anything out of my hand that I'm too concerned about. The lands are nice. I like the lands. They allow me to cast my spells, but they're not significant enough where I have to sacrifice something that I might be relying upon.
So let's talk about the inherent cost now. So the inherent cost is the diverging of resources, which I've kind of, been beating that drum the whole episode. At what point are you choosing to keep investing in this, to keep shocking in the example? And what's a little better about this one is you can at least throw them and you don't have to have combat damage to hit with the 2.
Which is so nice,
and
right?
so have you seen the other bridge that I've done here?
Yeah.
So the Bloodforged Battle Axe hits for 2.
You have to swing with that.
Base 2 is
you
what I
have to swing with it,
and
though,
the rock
to get the
hits
value.
for 2 to the face.
That's right.
It was shock variants. Granted, I know that you get where I'm going with this. But at what point are you choosing to use these resources and allocate them? And then the second, there is a cost always associated, and it's that cube equity slot, right? So something like Toggo that does cost 2 colorless and 1 mountain competes directly with every Rabble Master variant ever created. I mean, those are out of control at this point. Like, the 3 slot is insane to begin
with.
But
I feel like if you want to, really promote the Lands Matters theme and red is, in there, then why wouldn't you have a card like that? Especially because I look at a card like that. This effect is so incredibly unique. Like, Toggo, to me, is just a wonderful design, right? Very, very unique. If I want something that is a little bit different, plays a little different, that kind of card speaks volumes to me, right? It's not just I have to turn sideways. It's a goblin, and goblins sort of, they're more hoardy and you want to swing with them and sack them and stuff like that. This to me represents something there's a bit of a shift away from that, and as well with that Lands Matters theme. And if we could go all the way back to our Lands Matters episode, which is a very, very popular episode. And if you haven't listened to that, go check it out because it really is awesome. That is a popular archetype, man. People like the Lands Matters stuff because you're always playing your lands and now you're getting rewarded for it.
And on top of the lands matters, you also have artifact deck that's occurring here.
Yep.
Incidentally, both with the axe and with rock.
Yeah. So
you see the corollaries.
Look at the KCI stuff that we just talked about,
Yes.
right? So now instead of like having to invest any kind of mana as you would in maybe some other, or, you know, Bloodforged Battle Axe, I have to connect with it to get a copy of it to be able to sacrifice it to KCI. Now all I have to do is play a land,
make rock,
play a fetch land,
make rock,
make 2 rocks,
make rock.
And now I've played a land and got a fetch land and then sacked it and put another land into play. Now I've got 2 artifacts. I can sack them for 4 mana with KCI. I don't know about you, but I think I can kind of go bananas with that. You know what I could do with that 4 mana? I could equip 2 Bloodforged Battle Axes.
I just want I want Stu to appreciate the web that has been woven here. It's goofy.
I know.
I want to thank May for helping me with this. May helped me write this. I'll take credit for the Bloodforged Battle Axe, and then May's like, you know what a corollary is? Toggo. And together, look at this. This is peanut butter and chocolate. It didn't even mean to happen, but
it is.
But it's the 2s and the interactions and the free, and then sucking to an artifact line. These cards are strangely, they give you choose your own adventure, but they compete and they get overshadowed by cards that oftentimes look more powerful. But these are pretty interesting, spicy cards.
They are.
I would let me ask you a challenge question. I run a Lens Matters and I run an artifact deck in my powered vintage cube.
Sure.
If I had a slot in my red 3-drop, would you run Toggo in my powered vintage environment and make use of it? Wouldn't even draft it.
No.
With fetches and all the things.
Wouldn't even draft it.
I think I would be interested to try it. I'm not going to lie to you.
I don't think
there's some weird synergies here. It's synergy, not it doesn't play the way it looks.
It's just a little bit too slow for me in a vintage power environment. It just, don't get me wrong, being able to sack an artifact or being able to tap a creature and sack an artifact to do 2 damage is cool. It's a sweet effect. It's just too slow for powered vintage. It's just way too slow. Way too slow.
And the reason why Togo's not...
And Togo's only a 2 power.
Togo's actually... He is in fact represented in my 2-headed giant cube just for the lulz, because I do have some of the fetches and stuff like that in there. But he's not represented in my artifact cube because I don't run any lands that actually get good payoffs. So it'd be 1 rock at a time.
I feel like if that... Does that... Well, I'll ask that question, right? So does that cube run fetch lands?
It does not.
Okay. So I feel like if it ran...
This card rapidly.
It does. It really does. Because you need... I'd say you need
any version of a fetch land.
You really want to be able to have multiple activations in a turn so that you can, you know, equip it. Like if you could equip this to 2 creatures or have 2, if you could have 2 triggers and 2 of Rock's Enter and you can attach them both for 2 mana and then pay 2 more and deal 4 damage. Yeah, okay. I can see there where that could be valuable, but I don't know. It's a little slow for me.
So the core element of, or the core idea of this episode wasn't to get everybody to run Bloodforged Battle Axe.
You should, though. It's the greatest card ever printed.
It is pretty neat, but it's more of the evaluation of cards through, I guess, looking at it, you know, multiple avenues. You know, it's to choose your own adventure, if you will. Not looking at it so linear. The play lines are not as straight line as you might think they are. Bloodforged Battle Axe, yes, it is definitely a card that if you want to stack high and attack, you can. If you want to go wide with your multiple axes, you can. But also, if you wanted to do something with investing into an affinity for artifacts or goblin welder strategies, because you've connected enough that you need to do some alternate lines of play, this type of card provides those avenues. But the only cost that it required you was, well, granted, you connected, but all you did was play Magic the Gathering and tried to kill your opponent with a creature that had Bloodforged Battle Axe. Toggo has a similar type of skin on it. All it required was you to invest the 2 colorless plus red, and you get Toggo. And then you just play mana because you want to progress your game into turn 4, etc. And then you make Rock, which is funny. Rock is my favorite.
It's incredible.
It's a funny piece
And I really do believe that I think with the fetch lands, if you had a good density of them, I think the value of it would increase enough to warrant its inclusion in a thematic cube, because I really do believe that 2 damage is not to be scoffed at.
It is not. Bolt overshadows a shock every day, but you know what? 10 of
There's only one lightning bolt.
There's only so many.
There's only one lightning bolt.
I think it's really fascinating. Stu, do you have any final thoughts? This was just a fun episode of just looking at these cards, and this is our 50th episode, and Stu and I wanted to go a little light this evening.
We did, and I will say, so it's been a couple of episodes. I've had some life things come up, and Anthony has brought in some of our wonderful UberCube family and friends to come in and do some episodes. And I've mentioned to him in the past that yes, we started this podcast together, but I do believe that, we need to get other experts and other curators into the show to be able to offer their perspective, because this isn't about me. It's not about any individual. It's about the show. It's about Cube. It's about, the wonderful entertainment that we try to provide to our listeners. God love you all. But I think for this, it really does show how important it is to make sure that you're evaluating cards like in every potential tree out there in your cube, right? So take your cube. It's a big trunk. It's got all these possibilities. And, Anthony referenced his artifact cube, right? So the fact that he can be aggro with it is one sort of split, one branch away from the trunk. And then the ability to sacrifice artifacts is another, split away, another branch from the trunk. So really amazing to be able to have these possibilities that are not just, what can I do with this one individual card in this one archetype, but how amazingly impactful these cards can be, and just the decision making and the wonderful experiences they can give to your players, right? All the curators out there, you're creating this experience. You're putting all this time and effort into a format that you want it to be fun, and you want to give your players things to think about and a fun time and to enjoy drafting your cube. And I think things like this, discussions like this, and considerations like this when you're putting your cube together are so important for you to be able to really get a grasp on the kind of choices that you're giving to your players. Because you know what? As I'm not a good Magic player. I'm not a good Magic player. I'm a much better drafter than I am a Magic player. But I will look at this and I will see this when I'm drafting, and I'm looking at that Goblin Welder when I've seen that Bloodforged Battle Axe, and then I'm looking for those artifacts that I can power out and I can cheat out, right? And that not only is definitely power level contingent, right? Because that allows some pre-broken stuff, but it's also the fun that you can have with it as well. So thank you, Anthony. This was amazing. I love that you just kind of put this together and we just got to do this as our 50th episode. Again, I wasn't prepared for the episode. Usually we discuss the show notes at length. But I think this was cool that you kind of sprung this on me and was like, yo, we're going to talk about this. And I want you to, really, not have any time to prepare and, give us your thoughts about it. So Anthony, and much love. I'm sure I'm holding up a heart right now for Anthony and all the wonderful effort he does. I don't really talk about this too much with the recording, but the amount of effort that Anthony puts into the UberCube podcast, I just cannot explain how much time goes into, obviously we're doing the recording and all the tech and stuff, which is my side of things, but all the post-production and all the Twitters and the socials and all that kind of stuff that Anthony puts into this. It's so many hours of thankless and, what is it, 12 cents on Patreon or 12 cents on whatever it's got. It's so thankless, but it's so much time and effort that Anthony puts into, and it's all just for love of the format and to try and give back to the community. And I really want to give a big shout out to my co-host over here that I love dearly and is just such a wonderful person to have in our community, and just really does care so much about Cube and me too as a player. I really love the format, and I love that the community out there is so incredible, and I love the fact that we've done 50 episodes and here's to 50 more, and I love the fact that we've been able to do this for everyone for the past year.
Patrick Swayze said to Demi Moore in Ghost, ditto.
It's to me.
It was ditto. Ditto.
Ditto.
We can't really pull that off. I tried to say that to my wife one time. She's like, what do you mean ditto? I'm like, expound upon ditto. I'm like, no, ditto. Swayze said ditto.
Ditto.
But anyways, thank you. I appreciate it. Very kind words. This has been fun. This was just a episode just exploring through another lens. We like doing that. It's just about communicating and observing cards, not only 40,000 feet, so macro, micro, and just looking for divergent lines within your cards. Because oftentimes cards, they're deceiving in what they do. Both these cards that we kind of looked at had an aggro type tilt to them. But if you examine them through another lens, there was opportunities for more interactions outside of that, and they will fit into a lot of your environments that maybe they could become linchpins, Evie, but maybe they didn't look that way before. Stu, would you mind? This was a wonderful episode. Would you take us over the socials, please, sir?
So, as always, we would like to thank all of our listeners. We really appreciate all the time that you spend with us. If you want to reach out to us, hit us up, talk about this episode or any of our previous episodes, hit us up on Twitter. You can find us at UberCubeMTGPod. If you want to email us, maybe you've got a bit of a lengthy comment and you want to talk about either, a comment that we made or a choice that we made, then hit us up via email. We are UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. If you really are looking for some cool stuff to bling out your cube or your EDH deck or your modern deck, vintage, legacy, whatever the case may be, we'd love for you to go and check out Alter Sleeves at www.altersleeves.com/UberCube. If you use our link, you'll get 5% off your purchase for some pretty awesome stuff. Also, if you want to go and check out Inked Gaming, we have an affiliate link in our Twitter. You can go check them out for things like playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, all kinds of cool.
We got to get our mats actually ordered for CubeCon. I said this in May. I've got, I'm going to send out I guess we have all of our little icons that I can throw up, our little copyrighted icons I can toss up, and we can get some representation going on here for the UberCubes. But it'd be pretty dope.
Well, go check out In Gaming because they have some really, really sweet stuff, right? And I'm about the bling. Anthony will tell you that I'm all about
he's wearing his UberCube
the
shirt
showboat.
right now as we speak.
I've got my UberCube t-shirt on right now. And Anthony, I know I'm gonna say, first of all, come reach out to us. Come check us out on Discord.
Our Discord's actually booming now.
Our Discord is popping like nonstop. And I will say this, right? So a channel that I created recently, and I'm about it because I'm a bit braggadocious, right? Braggadocious, whatever.
Preach.
But I created a new channel in our Discord, and it is basically a deck show-off, right? So this came to me because we were hanging out, and I drafted this deck, and I was so proud of this deck. And I went undefeated with it. And I'm like, man, I really want to show off this deck. It's amazing. So I created a channel on our Discord and it's took off. Like, it's been really popular. So if you have drafted, right, you're over at your friend's house or you're drafting on MTGO, whatever the case may be, and you've just drafted the sweetest deck that you've ever drafted, I want to see it. I want you to come over, and not only do I want to see a picture of your deck, I want you to tell us why you drafted it, how you played it, what was your inspiration for it. I'm super excited to see your amazing decks. Tell us about the Patreon.
It's doing splendidly.
All right. So thank you again. We love you all. And as we exit this episode, we're going to say what we always do here on UberCube.
Happy cubing!